The combat training hall on Threshkar hummed with energy shields and the clash of practice weapons. Cadet Vexthor stood with his squad mates near the equipment racks, his purple scales catching the artificial light. He was a Kralin, a species known throughout the galaxy for producing warriors. His clawed hands gripped a training staff as he laughed with the others. "Did you see the new training schedule?" asked Silith, a Urandi female with 4 arms and natural armor plating. She held up her data pad, her antenna twitching with amusement. Vexthor leaned over to look. His golden eyes widened, then he burst out laughing. "Human military history? They're making us study humans." The group around them grew larger as other cadets noticed the commotion. There were Makthir warriors with their stone-like skin, Urandi soldiers with their multiple limbs, and more Kralons like Vexthor. All of them were the best of their species, sent to the Galactic Coalition Military Academy to become elite officers. "What's so funny about humans?" asked a younger cadet, a Makthir named Drun. Vexthor couldn't stop grinning. "Everything. They're the weakest species in the Coalition. No claws, no armor, no venom, no natural weapons at all. They're just soft pink creatures that somehow built spaceships before they killed themselves." Silith nodded, scrolling through the curriculum. "It says here we have to study their legends. Stories about soldiers who held positions against impossible odds. Tales of something called Berserker Rage. Accounts of humans fighting even with mortal wounds." The entire group erupted in laughter. "Mortal wounds?" Vexthor wiped his eyes. "A mortal wound means you're dying. How can you fight while dying? This is obviously propaganda." A tall Kralon named Zethral crossed his arms. "I heard humans can't even survive in standard gravity without their special suits. They come from a low-gravity world with a thin atmosphere." "That's not true," Silith said, reading from her pad. "Earth actually has higher gravity than most garden worlds, and their atmosphere is unusually oxygen-rich." "Then why are they so weak?" Vexthor challenged. "I've seen humans on base. They're small. They tire easily. In hand-to-hand combat trials, they always lose to real warrior races." Drun, the young Makthir, seemed thoughtful. "But humans are in the Coalition. They must have some value." "Technology," Zethral said dismissively. "They're good at building things. That's their only skill. They make decent engineers and technicians. But warriors?" He spat on the ground. "Never." Vexthor walked over to a holographic display and pulled up human anatomy. The image showed a human male, rotating slowly in 3 dimensions. "Look at this. No protective scales, no shells. Their bones break easily. Their skin tears with minimal force. They have only 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs. So limited. What about their teeth?" asked Silith, zooming in on the human's face. "Those front ones are flat. They're not even proper predator teeth." "Because they're not predators," Vexthor explained. "Humans are scavengers. They evolved eating plants and stealing kills from real predators. That's why they're so weak. They never had to fight for their food." The cadets gathered closer, examining the human anatomy with increasing mockery. They pointed out every weakness, every vulnerability, every way that humans fell short of true warrior species. "Their bones have no natural armor plating," noted one cadet. "Their organs are completely exposed in the torso," said another. "They don't even have a proper exoskeleton," added a third. Vexthor felt proud leading this discussion. He was top of his class, destined for command. His family had produced warriors for 30 generations. The idea that he had to waste time studying humans, the softest species to ever reach the stars, felt like an insult. "I bet their legends are all lies," he declared. "Probably stories they invented to make themselves feel brave. No species that weak could have real war heroes." The other cadets agreed loudly. They began making jokes, each trying to outdo the others with increasingly ridiculous scenarios of humans trying to be warriors. They acted out mock battles, pretending to faint from minor injuries or running away from imaginary enemies. Their laughter echoed through the training hall. Near the entrance, Instructor Chen stood quietly. He was human, one of the few human instructors at the academy. His dark eyes watched the cadets, but his weathered face showed no emotion. His gray hair was cut military short, and his posture was perfectly straight despite his age. Scars crossed his neck and disappeared under his uniform collar. Chen had heard every word. He had been through this before many times over his 30 years of teaching. Young warriors from strong species always thought the same way. They looked at human bodies and saw weakness. They didn't understand. Not yet. He waited until the laughter died down naturally. Then he walked forward, his boots making soft sounds on the training hall floor. "Cadets." he said quietly. The group turned, and several of them had the grace to look embarrassed. They snapped to attention, but Vexthor kept his chin high. He wasn't ashamed of speaking the truth. I hope you're all preparing well for next week's lectures, Chen continued in the same calm voice. We have a special guest coming to teach the Human Military History Unit. With respect, instructor, Vexthor said. Why do we need a special guest? Can't you teach us about your own species? Chen smiled slightly. It wasn't a warm smile. The guest has more relevant experience than I do. He's fought in real wars. He's seen things that most of you will hopefully never see. Who is it? Asked Silith, her curiosity overcoming her embarrassment. Fleet Admiral Korvastian. The effect was immediate. Every cadet's eyes went wide. Back straightened even more. Whispers spread through the group like electricity. Korvastian. The greatest warrior of the modern age. The hero who had turned the tide of the Void Wars. The Kralin who had become a legend across every coalition world. Soldiers told stories about him. Children played games pretending to be him. He had medals from 17 different species and had refused a seat on the Coalition High Council 3 times because he preferred to remain in active service. Vexthor felt his heart's beating faster. Korvastian was his idol, his inspiration, the proof that Kralins were the finest warriors in the galaxy. The Admiral is coming here? Vexthor could barely keep the excitement from his voice. To teach us? To teach you about humans, Chen corrected gently. That's specifically why he volunteered. He said there were some things you needed to understand. The instructor looked at each cadet in turn, his eyes holding a knowledge that made them uncomfortable. I suggest you come to the lecture with open minds. The Admiral doesn't waste time on lies or propaganda. Everything he tells you will be the truth. Chen turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Cadet Vexthor, you might want to review your comments about human legends being invented. The Admiral has strong opinions about that particular subject. With that, the human instructor walked away, leaving the cadets in stunned silence. Vexthor felt confused. Why would the greatest Kralin warrior in history care about defending human legends? It didn't make sense. Humans were weak. Everyone knew that. Even if Korvastian had fought alongside some humans, surely he understood the difference between warrior races and support species. This is incredible, Zethral whispered. We're going to learn from Korvastian himself. I can't believe it, Silith agreed. But Vexthor felt a small seed of doubt planted in his mind. Something about Instructor Chen's tone had been off. The human hadn't been angry at their mockery. He had been patient, almost pitying, like someone watching children who didn't yet understand the world. Vexthor shook off the feeling. He was being paranoid. Next week he would meet his hero and everything would make sense. Korvastian would teach them about war, about being true warriors, and maybe, just maybe, he would explain why the Coalition bothered keeping humans around at all. The cadets dispersed to continue their training, but the excitement remained. Fleet Admiral Korvastian was coming. Nothing else mattered. None of them noticed Instructor Chen watching from the doorway, his scarred hands clasped behind his back, his expression sad and knowing. He had seen this before. He would see it again. The young always had to learn the hard way. Some lessons could only be taught through truth. The lecture hall was packed. Every seat filled with eager cadets, and more stood along the walls. Word had spread beyond Vexthor's combat training group. When Fleet Admiral Korvastian agreed to give a lecture, everyone wanted to attend. Vexthor sat in the front row, his uniform perfectly pressed. He had barely slept the night before, too excited to rest. Today he would meet the greatest warrior of their generation. Today he would learn from a living legend. Silith sat beside him, unusually quiet. Even her normally twitching antennae were still, focused forward. Zethral and Drun were right behind them. The entire front section was filled with Kralins, all hoping to learn from their species' finest example. Instructor Chen stood at the podium waiting. He looked calm as always, his hands resting on the lectern. The massive display screen behind him showed the Coalition emblem. Attention, Chen called out. The room fell instantly silent. Every cadet stood back straight, eyes forward. The side door opened. Fleet Admiral Korvastian entered, and Vexthor felt his breath catch. The Admiral was massive, even for a Kralin. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his purple scales darker than Vexthor's, almost black in places. But it was the scars that drew the eye, hundreds of them crossing his scales in silver lines. His face had a deep scar running from his forehead down across one eye and onto his jaw. His left leg had visible damage. The scales never properly regenerated, showing old burn marks, and his right arm was missing entirely, replaced with a mechanical prosthetic that gleamed silver against his dark scales. He wore his uniform with absolute precision, covered in medals and ribbons from a dozen different worlds. His golden eyes swept the room, and Vexthor felt pinned by that gaze even though it lasted only a moment. "Be seated," the Admiral said. His voice was deep and carried effortlessly through the hall. Everyone sat. The room remained silent except for the soft sounds of bodies settling into chairs. Korvastian walked to the podium. He didn't limp despite his damaged leg. His prosthetic arm moved with perfect coordination. He stood before them like a mountain, solid and immovable. "I am Fleet Admiral Korvastian. You know who I am. You know what I've done. We're not here to discuss that." He paused, looking over the cadets. "We're here to discuss something more important. The nature of true warriors." Vexthor leaned forward, eager to absorb every word. "Instructor Chen tells me you've been studying various species' military capabilities," the Admiral continued. "So let me ask you a question. What makes an elite soldier?" Hands shot up immediately. The Admiral pointed to a Makthir cadet. "Strength, sir. Physical power to overcome the enemy." "Good." The Admiral pointed to another. "Natural weapons, sir. Claws, venom, armor." "Acceptable." Another point. "Tactical superiority, sir. Intelligence and planning." "Yes." One more. "Fearlessness, sir. The ability to face danger without hesitation." Korvastian nodded slowly. All reasonable answers. "These are qualities every military academy teaches. These are the foundations of warrior cultures across the galaxy." He paused. "These are also incomplete." The cadets shifted, uncertain. "Let me ask a different question," the Admiral said. "How many of you have fought in actual combat? Not training exercises, not simulations. Real combat where the enemy is trying to kill you." A few hands rose. Veterans who had seen minor conflicts or patrol actions. "Perhaps 20 out of 200 cadets. Keep your hands up," the Admiral instructed. "Now, of those with hands raised, how many have fought beside humans in actual combat?" Every hand went down. The Admiral's scarred face showed no expression. "Then you know nothing of war." The words hit like a physical blow. Vexthor felt his spine stiffen. How could the Admiral say that? These were elite cadets, the best warriors their species had to offer. "You think that's harsh?" Korvastian observed, reading their reactions. "You think I'm exaggerating for effect? You're wrong on both counts." He gestured to Instructor Chen. "Pull up the Battle of Kelthro Station." "Authorization Korvastian 77 Delta." The screen behind him flickered to life. 30 years ago, during the Void Wars, I commanded a fleet task force against the Scourge," the Admiral began. His voice was steady, but something dark moved behind his eyes. For those too young to remember, the Scourge were an insectoid species bent on consuming every other form of life. They were perfect biological killing machines. No fear, no mercy, no negotiation. The screen showed space combat footage. Coalition ships fighting against massive organic vessels that looked like they had been grown rather than built. The Battle of Kelthro Station was meant to be a defensive holding action, the Admiral continued. "We were buying time for civilian evacuations. My ship took heavy damage. I took an assault team down to the station to secure critical systems and organize the ground defense." The footage changed. Now it showed the interior of a space station, dark and damaged. Emergency lights flickered. In the chaos, Vexthor could see Kraylan warriors in combat armor, taking positions behind barriers. "That's you," Silith whispered, pointing at the screen. She was right. A younger Korvastian, both arms intact, commanded the defensive positions. His tactical deployments were textbook perfect. His warriors were elite, the best the Kraylans had to offer. "We held for 6 hours," the Admiral said quietly. "Then the Scourge broke through the secondary bulkheads. They came in numbers we hadn't anticipated. Wave after wave. We killed hundreds, thousands. But they kept coming. The footage showed the battle deteriorating. Kraylan warriors fighting magnificently but being overwhelmed. Their ammunition was running low. Their defensive positions were crumbling. We were surrounded," Korvastian stated flatly. "Cut off from extraction. No ammunition. No reinforcements. My entire unit was about to be wiped out. The screen showed scourge creatures pouring through a breach, their mandibles clicking, their multiple legs carrying them forward in a horrifying tide. Then the humans arrived. The footage shifted. A new group of soldiers appeared, moving through a side corridor. They wore standard coalition combat armor, but their movements were different, faster, more aggressive, and their numbers were small. A single company, the Admiral said, 150 humans. That's all the coalition could spare. They were meant to be technical support, not frontline infantry. Vexthor stared at the screen. The humans looked tiny compared to the Kralon warriors. Their armor seemed less substantial. They carried standard kinetic weapons, nothing special. Watch, the Admiral commanded. The humans hit the scourge line like a hammer. They didn't use careful tactics. They didn't establish defensive positions. They simply attacked, moving forward into overwhelming enemy numbers. Vexthor watched in disbelief as a human soldier, her name tag reading Santos, held a breach point alone. The scourge came at her in waves and she killed them methodically, her weapon firing in controlled bursts. She was wounded. Even through the armor, Vexthor could see the jerky movements that indicated injury. But she didn't fall back. She didn't retreat. She stood there for what the timestamp showed was 7 minutes, holding that position by herself. Lieutenant Maria Santos, the Admiral said softly. 3 broken ribs. Punctured lung. She held that breach until reinforcements arrived. Then she moved forward to the next position. The footage jumped to another scene. A human sergeant, his armor breached and leaking atmosphere, charged a scourge position. His weapon had malfunctioned. He pulled out a combat knife, just a simple blade, and killed 3 scourge warriors in close combat before his squad could catch up. Sergeant James Park, the Admiral continued. His suit lost pressure. He was breathing pure oxygen from his emergency reserve. He should have retreated. He attacked instead. Scene after scene played out. Humans fighting with broken bones. Humans bleeding from wounds that should have stopped them. Humans pushing forward when any logical soldier would have fallen back. It wasn't heroic in the way Vexthor had imagined heroism. It was brutal, desperate, savage. They don't stop. The Admiral's voice cut through the shocked silence. That's what you need to understand. They simply don't stop. A human medic appeared on screen, dragging a wounded Kralon warrior twice her size through enemy fire. She got him to safety, then immediately went back for another. They don't stop, the Admiral repeated. You can wound them. You can break their bones. You can puncture their organs. But unless you destroy their brain or heart, they keep fighting. The footage showed the turning point of the battle. The human company, now down to perhaps 90 soldiers, pushed the scourge back through sheer impossible aggression. They didn't have more firepower. They didn't have better tactics. They simply refused to die. And the scourge, creatures that knew no fear, began to retreat. I have fought beside every warrior race in the coalition, Admiral Korvastian said, his prosthetic hand gripping the podium. I have seen Kralon stand firm against incredible odds. I have watched Makthir warriors break enemy lines with unstoppable force. I have witnessed Urandi precision in combat that borders on art. He paused, his golden eyes sweeping across every face in the silent lecture hall. But I have never, in all my years of war, seen anything that matches what humans become when they decide they're not done fighting. The lecture hall remained absolutely silent. 200 cadets sat frozen, staring at the screen where the battle footage had frozen on an image of human soldiers, battered and bleeding, standing Victoria. The next lecture came 3 days later, but Vexthor had thought about nothing else. He had watched the footage from Kelthro Station dozens of times on his personal data pad. Each viewing showed him something new, some detail he had missed. The way humans moved, the way they fought, the way they simply refused to accept defeat. The lecture hall was even more crowded this time. Word had spread across the entire academy. Cadets who hadn't attended the first lecture pushed their way in, wanting to see what everyone was talking about. The walls were lined with standing observers. Some sat in the aisles. Admiral Korvastian entered exactly on time. Today he wore his combat uniform instead of the formal dress version. The scars on his scales seemed more visible somehow. The prosthetic arm gleamed under the lights. We're continuing where we left off, the Admiral began without preamble. The Battle of Kelthro Station. You saw how the humans fought. Today I'll tell you why they fought that way and what it means. He gestured to the screen. New footage appeared, picking up where the last lecture had ended. after the humans pushed back the initial Scourge attack. We had approximately 30 minutes before the next wave, the Admiral explained. Standard procedure would be to establish defensive positions, redistribute ammunition, evacuate the wounded. The humans did something different. The footage showed human soldiers moving through the station's corridors, but they were running toward the Scourge positions. Not away from them. They attacked, Vexthor whispered. Disbelieving. They attacked, the Admiral confirmed. They had just fought off an overwhelming assault. They were wounded, low on ammunition, exhausted, and they decided the best strategy was to press the advantage. The screen showed what happened next. The humans hit the Scourge staging areas before the creatures could organize their next assault. It was chaos, brutal and savage, but it worked. The Scourge, caught off guard, fell back again. This is when I made a decision that saved all our lives, the Admiral said. I stopped thinking of the humans as support troops and started following their tactical suggestions. A Urandi cadet raised one of her 4 hands. Sir, you took tactical advice from humans over your own battle experience? Yes, the Admiral said simply. Because they understood something I didn't. They understood the Scourge weren't the most dangerous enemy in that battle. What was? Asked Drun. Time, and our own fear. The Admiral pointed at the screen. The Scourge wanted us to be afraid. They wanted us to be defensive. They wanted us to dig in and wait for them to overwhelm us. The humans refused to play that game. The footage continued. Human soldiers and Kraylan warriors now fighting together, pushing deeper into Scourge territory. Vexthor could see the difference in fighting styles. The Kraylans were skilled, powerful, efficient, but they were also careful, measuring risks. The humans had abandoned caution entirely. This is Lieutenant Santos again, the Admiral said as the camera focused on the human soldier from the previous lecture. She was coordinating an assault on a Scourge command node. Her armor was cracked. Blood leaked from the seals, but her voice over the comm was steady, professional. She had 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung, Vexthor said, remembering. How is she still fighting? Adrenaline, the Admiral answered. Human bodies produce a chemical that temporarily overrides pain and damage. It gives them strength and speed beyond their normal capabilities. Every human has this. It's not training. It's evolution, Silith leaned forward. But that would cause more damage. Fighting with broken bones would make the injuries worse. Yes, the Admiral agreed. Humans know this. They fight anyway. Because mission success matters more than personal survival. The footage shifted to show a Scourge warrior, larger than the others, charging at Sergeant Park. The human's weapon clicked empty. He didn't retreat. He didn't call for help. He simply dropped the gun, pulled out his combat knife, and met the charge. What happened next made several cadets gasp. Park killed the Scourge in close combat, using techniques that seemed impossible for a creature without natural weapons. He used the knife, yes, but also his elbows, his knees, his forehead. Every part of his body became a weapon. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, the Admiral explained, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. On their homeworld, they would chase prey until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. They didn't need claws or fangs. They needed endurance, the ability to keep going when every other species would stop. The screen showed more combat footage, but now the Admiral narrated, pointing out details. Watch Lieutenant Santos. See how she breathes? Even with a punctured lung, she's controlling her breathing to maintain oxygen to her brain. This is training, but it's training based on natural capability. Look at Sergeant Park. His weapon jammed 3 times during that assault. Each time he switched to hand-to-hand combat without hesitation. No other species makes that transition so smoothly. Here, a human medic is treating wounds while under fire. Notice she's been shot in the leg. She's still working. The pain suppression is allowing her to function. On and on it went. Example after example of humans doing things that should be impossible. Not through technology or superior equipment, but through sheer biological refusal to quit. This is the part that changed everything, the Admiral said quietly. The footage showed a massive explosion. Part of the station's hull had been breached. Scourge were pouring through in unprecedented numbers. The human company and the Kraylan warriors fell back to a junction point, trying to establish a defensive line. They were going to lose. Vexthor could see it in the tactical display. The Scourge numbers were too great. The coalition forces were about to be completely overrun. This is where I lost my arm, the Admiral said. his prosthetic hand touching his right shoulder. A scourge weapon, something between a gun and a biological launcher. It tore through my armor and severed the limb. The footage showed younger Corvastian falling, his right arm hanging by threads of tissue, blood sprayed in the low gravity painting the walls purple. I was going into shock, the Admiral continued, his voice emotionless. My natural physiology was shutting down non-essential functions to preserve core life support. In approximately 90 seconds, I would have lost consciousness. That's normal Kralin biology. It's how we survive catastrophic wounds. The screen showed Scourge warriors moving toward the fallen Admiral. His squad was pinned down, unable to reach him. He was going to die. Then a human soldier appeared, running directly through enemy fire. She grabbed the Admiral's good arm and started dragging him backward. Scourge shots hit around them. One grazed her helmet. That's combat medic Angela Rodriguez, the Admiral said. She weighed approximately 60 kilograms. I weighed 240. She dragged me 18 meters to cover while under continuous fire. Vexthor did the math in his head. That was impossible. The weight ratio alone made it impossible, but the footage showed it happening. She applied a tourniquet to my arm, injected me with Coalition standard trauma medication, and then went back out. The Admiral continued. She dragged 3 more wounded soldiers to safety before the position was secured. The screen showed Rodriguez moving through the battle, her armor scorched and damaged, pulling wounded soldiers from both species to safety. She didn't discriminate. She didn't prioritize her own species. She saved everyone she could reach. I asked her later, after we were evacuated, why she came for me first, the Admiral said. I was the most severely wounded, which made me the lowest priority by standard triage protocols. She should have saved the soldiers who had better chances of survival. He paused, and for the first time, Vexthor saw emotion on the Admiral's scarred face. It wasn't pride. It wasn't satisfaction. It was something closer to awe. She said, "You're the Admiral. The troops need you. If you die, morale dies, so you don't get to die." Then she went back to treating other patients. The lecture hall was silent. Humans understand something most species don't, the Admiral said. They understand that war isn't just about fighting. It's about refusing to accept loss. Every human I've ever fought beside has this quality. They look at impossible situations and they say no. He pointed at the frozen image of Medic Rodriguez, covered in blood and burn marks, dragging a Kralin warrior 3 times her size. You mock their legends. The Admiral's voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the hall. You laugh at their stories of soldiers holding impossible positions, of humans fighting with mortal wounds, of berserker rage and superhuman feats. He looked directly at Vexthor, and the young cadet felt pinned by that golden gaze. Their legends aren't exaggerations, the Admiral said. They're understatements, because human modesty won't let them tell the full truth of what they're capable of. The Admiral pulled up a new data set on the screen, statistics and charts. This is classified Coalition military data, he said, but I've been given permission to share it with this class. These are survival rates for mixed species units versus single species units. The numbers told a clear story. Units with human members had survival rates 15 to 30% higher than comparable units without humans. Vexthor spent the days between lectures in the Academy's library, researching everything he could find about Earth and human evolution. The more he learned, the more disturbed he became. Earth wasn't a garden world like most species came from. It was classified as a Class 7 death world, barely suitable for colonization by galactic standards. He learned about Earth's predators, creatures called lions, tigers, bears, crocodiles. He learned about Earth's diseases, its environmental extremes, its natural disasters. Humans had evolved in a place that was actively trying to kill them every single day. And they had survived. More than survived. They had thrived. They had become the apex predator of their entire planet. When the third lecture began, Vexthor was ready to listen. Really listen without prejudice or assumption. Admiral Corvastian stood at the podium looking over the assembled cadets. The crowd had somehow grown even larger. There were cadets from advanced years attending now, senior officers, even a few visiting dignitaries from other Coalition worlds. Today we discuss human culture, the Admiral began, because you cannot understand human soldiers without understanding human civilization. The screen behind him showed Earth from orbit, a blue and green world beautiful despite its deadly nature. Humans evolved without natural weapons, the Admiral stated. No claws, no venom, no armor. They were prey animals originally. Everything on their world was stronger, faster, or more dangerous than they were. The screen showed various Earth predators. Vexthor recognized some from his research. So they evolved something different, the Admiral continued. They evolved endurance. Humans can run for hours without stopping. They can survive in nearly any climate. They can heal from wounds that would be fatal to most species. And most importantly, they evolved cooperation. New images appeared. Humans working together in groups from ancient times to modern day. Every species cooperates to some degree, the Admiral said. But humans took it to an extreme. They formed tribes, then villages, then cities, then nations. They learned to work together in groups of millions. And they learned to extend that cooperation beyond their own genetic lines. Silith raised a hand. Sir, how is that different from any other civilization? Because humans cooperate with anyone, the Admiral replied. Watch. The footage changed to show modern coalition bases. Humans working with Kralins, with Urandi, with Makthir, with dozens of other species. But it wasn't just working together. The humans were teaching, helping, sharing resources, volunteering for the hardest jobs. Humans have a concept called pack bonding, the Admiral explained. It's a behavior left over from their evolutionary history. Humans will form emotional attachments to almost anything. They bond with other humans easily. But they also bond with other species, with animals, even with inanimate objects. Several cadets laughed nervously. The Admiral's expression didn't change. You think I'm joking? I'm not. Humans on military bases give names to their vehicles. They talk to their weapons. They form friendships with alien species they've known for less than a week. This isn't weakness. This is their greatest strength. He pulled up more combat footage from Kelthro Station. Watch this moment carefully, the Admiral said. The footage showed the battle at its worst point. Scourge were everywhere. A Kralin warrior, not the Admiral, was surrounded. He was going to die. 3 human soldiers broke from their formation and charged the Scourge position. They saved the Kralin, but one of the humans was killed in the process. Private First Class David Kim, the Admiral said quietly, 22 years old. He had met that Kralon warrior, Sergeant Vektal, exactly 6 days earlier. They had shared exactly 3 conversations, and Kim died to save him. The Admiral paused. I asked Vektal later what those conversations were about. He said they had talked about food from their home worlds, about missing their families, about being scared before battle. Normal things. Human things. And that was enough, the Admiral continued. 6 days. 3 conversations. That was enough for Private Kim to decide Sergeant Vektal was worth dying for. The lecture hall was completely quiet. Vexthor felt something tight in his chest. He thought about his own training, his own culture. Kralon's respected fellow warriors. They fought beside their units. But would he die for someone he had known for 6 days? He didn't know. Humans have a saying, the Admiral said. No one left behind. They mean it literally. Every human military unit, from their ancient history to their modern space forces, follows this principle. They will risk everything to recover their people. The screen showed more footage. Human soldiers carrying wounded comrades through enemy fire. Human medics staying behind to treat patients while everyone else evacuated. Human commanders being the last ones off damaged ships. But it's not just their own people, the Admiral added. Watch this. New footage from a different battle. A human squad was evacuating a civilian area during a Scourge attack. The civilians were Urandi, not human. The humans formed a defensive line, holding off the Scourge while the Urandi families escaped. 2 humans died buying time for aliens they had never met before. This is not abnormal behavior for humans, the Admiral said. This is standard, expected. If a human soldier leaves civilians behind to save themselves, they are punished severely. Their own culture condemns them. Drun, the young Makthir, spoke up. Sir, that seems inefficient. Soldiers are valuable assets. Civilians can be replaced. The Admiral's golden eyes fixed on Drun, and the young cadet wished he had stayed silent. That, the Admiral said coldly, is exactly the kind of thinking that makes you weaker than humans. Humans don't see people as assets. They see everyone as people. And that makes them fight harder than any species that thinks in terms of resources and replacement. He turned back to the screen. Let me show you something else about human history. Images appeared. Humans fighting humans. Ancient wars, modern conflicts, civil wars, world wars. Destruction on a massive scale. Humans spent thousands of years fighting each other, the Admiral said. They nearly destroyed themselves multiple times. They invented weapons capable of wiping out their entire species, and then they made a choice. The images changed to show humans helping each other, building together, exploring space together. They chose to stop, the Admiral said simply, not because someone conquered them, not because they ran out of resources, but because they decided that cooperation was better than conflict. That's not weakness. That's wisdom earned through suffering. He pulled up a holographic display of human brain structure. Human brains are wired for violence, the Admiral explained. They have aggression built into their psychology. They evolved as hunters and warriors, but they also evolved the ability to control that violence, to channel it, to use it only when necessary. The hologram highlighted different regions. This is why humans can be terrifying in combat but gentle in peace. They have both capabilities. Most species are one or the other. Humans are both. Vexthor was beginning to understand. Humans weren't weak despite their lack of natural weapons. They were dangerous because they had learned to be weapons themselves. There's something else you need to know, the Admiral said, his tone becoming more serious. Something the Coalition keeps classified but that you, as future officers, must understand. He pulled up a new data file marked with the highest security clearances. These are psychiatric evaluations of human soldiers after combat, the Admiral said. Humans call it post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. It's what happens to human minds after they've done violence. The data showed rates of psychological trauma in human veterans. The numbers were shockingly high. Humans are damaged by war, the Admiral said quietly, more than any other species. Their minds remember the violence. They have nightmares. They feel guilt. They suffer for years after battles end. Silith looked confused. But sir, if combat damages them, why do they fight so well? Because they fight anyway, the Admiral replied. Knowing it will hurt them. Knowing they'll carry the scars forever. They fight anyway because someone has to. That's not courage. That's sacrifice. He closed the data file. Most species don't experience significant trauma from combat. Our psychologies are built for it. But humans feel every death. They remember every face. And they choose to fight anyway because the alternative is letting others suffer. The Admiral walked to the front of the podium, looking directly at the cadets. You wanted to know what makes humans special, he said. This is it. They're not the strongest. They're not the fastest. They're not even the smartest. But they're the most stubborn, the most loyal, the most willing to sacrifice themselves for others. He gestured at the screen, which now showed a simple image. A human soldier's helmet placed on a rifle stuck in the ground. A memorial. Every human knows they might not come home, the Admiral said. Every human soldier understands they might die in some far corner of the galaxy, fighting for people they've never met, protecting worlds they've never seen. And they volunteer anyway. He paused, letting that sink in. There are currently 247,000 humans serving in Coalition military forces, the Admiral continued. That's a tiny fraction of galactic military strength. But Coalition commanders request them constantly. Do you know why? No one answered. The final lecture took place 1 week later. In that week, Vexthor had watched the Kelthro station footage so many times he could recite the tactical movements from memory. He had read human history files until his eyes ached. He had even approached Instructor Chen with questions, and the human had answered patiently, never once saying, "I told you so." The lecture hall was packed as always, but the atmosphere was different now. The cadets were quieter, more serious. They had learned something over the past few weeks, and it had changed them. Admiral Korvastian entered and immediately began speaking. We've covered human combat capabilities, human psychology, and human culture, he said. Today we discuss the future. Your future. Because in 1 week you'll begin your training rotations with human units. He pulled up a list of names and assignments on the screen. These assignments are not random, the Admiral explained. Each of you has been matched to a human unit based on your weaknesses, not your strengths. You're not being sent to learn what you're already good at. You're being sent to learn what you lack. Vexthor saw his name appear. He was assigned to the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Unit, based on the human colony world of Aphrodite. Instructor Chen was listed as his supervising officer. Before you begin your rotations, you need to understand something crucial, the Admiral continued. Something I didn't tell you in previous lectures. He paused, and Vexthor felt tension building in the room. I asked earlier who among you had fought beside humans, the Admiral said. No hands went up. But I didn't ask the full question. The full question is, why haven't you fought beside humans? Silith raised one of her hands. Sir, humans are rare in frontline positions. They're usually in support roles. Wrong, the Admiral said flatly. That's what you assume. The truth is different. He pulled up deployment statistics. Humans make up 0.3% of coalition military personnel, but they're present in 67% of frontline combat operations. How is that possible? No one answered. Because humans volunteer, the Admiral said. Every dangerous mission, every desperate situation, every time a commander asks for volunteers for something that might be a suicide run, humans step forward. Not because they're ordered, because they choose to. New data appeared on screen. Casualty rates. Human casualty rates are 4 times higher than the galactic average, the Admiral stated. Not because they're bad soldiers, because they're always in the worst situations. They take the hardest jobs. They volunteer for the longest deployments. They accept the missions everyone else refuses. Vexthor felt something heavy settle in his stomach. All those jokes about humans being weak, all that mockery, and the entire time, humans were dying at 4 times the rate of every other species because they volunteered for the most dangerous positions. So, when you go to your training rotations, the Admiral said, remember that the humans teaching you have chosen to be there. They could have safer assignments. They could work in logistics, in engineering, in communications, but they're on the front lines because someone has to be. He changed the display to show a simple question in large letters. Why do humans fight? I've given you facts and data, the Admiral said. I've shown you footage and statistics. But the real answer to this question is simpler than you think. He looked over the assembled cadets. Humans fight because they think everyone deserves protection. Not just their own species, not just their own people. Everyone. They look at the galaxy and they see people who need defending, and they decide to be the ones who defend them. The Admiral's voice became softer, almost gentle. Most species fight for territory, for resources, for survival. Humans fight for ideals. They fight for concepts like justice and freedom and dignity. They die for these ideas. Vexthor remembered something he had read, a human military motto, for those who cannot fight for themselves. At the time, he had thought it was just propaganda. Now he understood it was their actual operating principle. There's a reason I'm telling you all of this, the Admiral said. A reason beyond just correcting your ignorance about human capabilities. He stepped forward, his prosthetic hand gesturing toward the cadets. You are going to be officers. You will command troops from multiple species, and someday you will have humans under your command. When that day comes, you need to understand what you have. The Admiral's voice became intense. Humans will follow you into hell if you ask them to. They will die for your decisions, and they will do it without complaint, without hesitation, because that's what they do. But they deserve better than commanders who see them as soft or weak or expendable. He pulled up one final image. It was a human soldier's grave marker on some distant world. The inscription read, "She died so others could live." Every human who serves knows they might end up like this, the Admiral said quietly. A marker on a world they never called home, fighting for people they never met. And they serve anyway. The room was absolutely silent. Vexthor felt shame burning in his chest. He had mocked these soldiers. He had laughed at their legends. And the entire time they were the bravest beings in the galaxy. Questions, the Admiral said, opening the floor. Vexthor's hand shot up. The Admiral nodded at him. Sir? Vexthor's voice was rough. Why didn't you tell us this at the beginning? Why make us watch the combat footage first? The Admiral's scarred face showed something that might have been a smile. Would you have believed me? If I had started by telling you humans were the finest warriors in the Coalition, would you have listened? Vexthor thought about it honestly. No, sir. I would have thought you were exaggerating. Exactly, the Admiral said. You had to see it yourselves. You had to watch humans do impossible things before you would accept that they could. Silith spoke up. Sir, what happened to the humans from Kelthro Station? Lieutenant Santos, Sergeant Park, Medic Rodriguez? The Admiral's expression became sad. Santos retired after the war. She lives on Earth now. Park died 2 years later in a different battle, saving a Makthir family from a collapsing building. Rodriguez is still active duty. She's a medical instructor at the human training facility on Mars. He paused. I visit Rodriguez every year. We share a meal. We remember the soldiers who didn't come home. And every year she tells me she'd do it all again. That's the kind of person humans are. Drun, the young Mokthir, raised his hand. Sir, you said we're being sent to learn what we lack. What do I lack? The Admiral looked at the assignment list. You're going to a human peacekeeping unit. You'll learn that strength isn't just about combat. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones you fight without weapons. Another cadet asked, Sir, will the humans accept us after we mocked them? For the first time in all the lectures, the Admiral actually smiled. Humans, they'll probably make jokes about it. They'll laugh with you, not at you, because humans understand that ignorance can be fixed with knowledge. They'll judge you on what you do going forward, not what you did in the past. Instructor Chen, who had been standing quietly at the side of the room, spoke up. The Admiral is being diplomatic. The truth is, my Marines are going to run you until you throw up, work you until you cry, and push you harder than you've ever been pushed. But at the end of it, you'll be better soldiers, and they'll adopt you into their unit family whether you want it or not. Several cadets laughed nervously. Chen's expression was completely serious. The Admiral nodded. Chen is correct. Humans train hard, they expect excellence, but they also take care of their people. If you're assigned to a human unit, you'll eat better, sleep better, and be safer than in any other assignment. Because humans take care of their own and they consider everyone on their team to be their own. He looked at Vexthor directly. Cadet Vexthor, you were the most vocal in your criticism of humans. Do you still believe they're the softest species to reach the stars? Vexthor stood at attention. No, sir. I was wrong. Completely wrong. Humans aren't soft. They're steel wrapped in flesh. Good answer, the Admiral said, but incomplete. Humans are both soft and hard. They're gentle when they can be and deadly when they must be. That's what makes them human. The Admiral gestured to the screen behind him, which now showed images of humans doing various tasks. Some were in combat. Some were helping rebuild destroyed cities. Some were teaching alien children. Some were tending to wounded soldiers. This is what you need to understand, the Admiral said. Humans contain multitudes. They are warriors and healers. They are scientists and poets. They are capable of great violence and great compassion, often in the same day. You cannot understand humans by putting them in a single category. He looked at each cadet in turn. When you go to your training rotations, pay attention to everything. Not just the combat training. Watch how humans interact with each other. Watch how they handle failure. Watch how they celebrate success. Watch how they mourn their dead. The Admiral's voice dropped lower. And watch how they treat you. Because that will teach you more about humanity than any lecture I could give. Vexthor felt his resolve strengthen. He would pay attention. He would learn. He would become worthy of fighting beside humans. Final question, the Admiral said. Anyone? A Kraylan cadet from the back row spoke up. Sir, you lost your arm saving humans at Kelthros Station. Do you regret it?